This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. South Korean police may make a second attempt to arrest suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol after he skipped his impeachment trial. Authorities could act as early as tomorrow morning. Manila calls out Beijing, slamming the deployment of China's largest Coast Guard vessels in its waters, an act it says is aimed at intimidating Filipino fishermen. America's TikTok users bracing for a ban are jumping ship straight to China's Instagram like Xiaohongshu, which is now topping the App Store charts. And the US tightens its grip on AI chip flows across the globe in Joe Biden's final days as president. Also in East Asia tonight, a hunt is underway in China for cosmic particles that could unlock the secrets of the universe. We'll check out the cutting-edge detector buried 700 meters underground. South Korea's Constitutional Court has adjourned the first hearing of an impeachment trial against suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol. The session ended in just minutes after the embattled leader failed to show up. While Mr. Yoon has not left the presidential residence in Seoul for weeks, and the Presidential Security Service has prevented dozens of investigators from detaining him. The standoff earlier this month lasted nearly 6 hours. And reports say that police and anti-corruption agency officials have held their third meeting to map out plans to take Mr. Yoon into custody. This second attempt to detain him could reportedly take place as early as tomorrow morning. Well, this comes amid a rebound in public support for the ruling People Power Party. Recent polls suggest that support ratings have surged to what they were before Mr. Yoon's martial law declaration. And for the very latest, CNA's Lim Yoon-suk, she joins us live now from Seoul. Yoon-suk, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about Mr. Yoon's no-show at his impeachment court hearing earlier today.
Well, yes, he wasn't there at the impeachment trial earlier, and there have been some speculation that he would attend personally, since his lawyers had earlier said that he would, to defend himself, attend some of the impeachment trials. But following that first failed attempt by investigators to arrest him, I think President Yoon and his lawyers thought that it was too risky, since his lawyers are concerned that he could be detained if he attends his trials. Like, he could just walk out of the Constitutional Court after the hearing, and there will be investigators waiting for him outside to take him away. And that's why his lawyer said that he couldn't attend Tuesday's hearing. Though, this was the first hearing at the Constitutional Court, it only lasted about 4 minutes, with the court confirming the attendances by the two sides, one representing President Yoon and the other representing Parliament, which voted to impeach President Yoon. Then it was really over, with the court saying that the next session will be held as scheduled on Thursday this week. Now, it's unsure if President Yoon Suk-yeol will be attending Thursday's session, but, if things have not changed and they are in this situation we are now, with investigators still trying to figure out a way to arrest him, then it is very likely that President Yoon will not be at that hearing too. Now, this is what his lawyer told reporters after Tuesday's hearing.
오늘 재판 진행 상황과 추후 상황을 보면서 우리 증거 신청 그리고 입증 방법들을 종합적으로 검토해서 결정을 하도록 하겠습니다.
Well, in the meantime, Yoon-suk, the police, we've got the anti-corruption officials gearing up for, a second attempt to arrest Mr. Yoon as early as tomorrow morning, as what some news reports are reporting. What sort of considerations do they have to ensure safety of protesters if that happens?
Well, yes, many local reports here are saying that it is likely to happen as early as 5 a.m. local time on Wednesday or sometime in the morning. Now, the anti-corruption agency, the police, and the Presidential Security Service have held meetings this morning to discuss this arrest warrant, but apparently there was no progress made, and it really ended with the anti-corruption agency asking the Presidential Security Service to cooperate with their arrest warrant because earlier the Presidential Service had blocked the investigators from entering when they tried to get in the first time. Now, this time around, the anti-corruption agency seems very determined to make sure it doesn't fail. And according to reports, it has rounded out more than 1,000 officers to be deployed in this operation, which they're saying that it could even last for more than one day. And so they've been asked to prepare for this, to bring extra batteries, to bring more things to this, to that raid when they do go in trying to arrest President Yoon. Now, presidential bodyguards have also been warned that they too can be arrested on site if they try to block them again. Now, there's no word about, how they plan to carry this out and what safety measures they have in place, especially for the people outside the residence, as there are hundreds of them, on weekdays too, from both sides, from those supporting President Yoon and those against them. And so there are grave concerns of a possible clash, and not really just between the investigators and the bodyguards, but especially among the protesters, whom, many are elderly and also very young. But let's listen to what one lawmaker from the main opposition Democratic Party said related to this.
공수처의 세 차례에 걸친 체포 소환 요구에 응하지 않았고 두 차례에 걸친 체포 영장을 발부케 하는 국법을 극단적으로 멸시하고 모멸하고 무시하는 행태를 반복하고 있습니다. 존경하는 대한민국의 헌법재판소의 재판관 여러분들께서 신속하고 엄정하게 윤석열에 대한 파면 결정을 내려주실 것을 진심으로 간곡히 부탁드립니다. 이상입니다.
So, Yoon, what's also interesting to note is that Mr. Yoon and his ruling People Power Party, they appear to have been gaining public support in recent weeks based on surveys. And we've also seen the many protesters, camping outside his residential compound, Jiangmen, as you've mentioned. And that's all despite the martial law decree and political turmoil and his no-show. So help us understand, why is this happening?
I think that's something that, many people are surprised at also. I mean, they've seen the opinion polls in recent days. And yes, President Yoon's approval ratings and also for his ruling party have gone up. And many here think that it's because the presidential office and also some of its aides and also the lawyers for President Yoon have been really out there explaining why President Yoon had to carry out the martial law. And in fact, I was out at those rallies and I see a lot more, and very surprisingly, a lot more young people supporting President Yoon. And I did speak to a lot of them, and many of them were saying, yes, they were shocked like all of us when he declared that martial law and believed that he should be punished. But they went back to do more research to find out why he did this. And many are finding valid reasons for him to be carrying out that martial law. And also, there are many of people in their 20s and 30s, especially a lot of the YouTubers, young people who have been really very active in trying to explain the scenes behind all of this and what really is going on here in South Korea. There's talk about illegal election fraud. There's talk about how the parliament, which is led by the main opposition party, have really been trying to impeach everyone on President Yoon's side. And all of this, these are stuff that we've seen in the news reports, but they don't really take very seriously. But a lot of the young people and South Koreans are now starting to take notice because the big question really for everyone is, why did President Yoon Suk-yeol declare that martial law? Because he is someone who knows the law very well. He was the prosecutor's office. He was the prosecutor general. So for someone like him to carry out this dramatic move, he must have a plan and there must be a valid reason. And it seems like a lot of the young people in their 20s and 30s are out there looking for those reasons. And they believe that he did have those valid reasons. And that's why they're out there together with mainly the elderly conservatives who were out there even for years supporting the Conservative Party. But now they're joining hands with the elderly South Koreans here, saying that they know why he had to declare martial law and they believe that he should not be impeached or arrested. And so it is very surprising. And right now, the ruling party also is only a few points away from the main opposition party's popularity. And so we'll have to watch to see how far this goes. But it is very surprising. And really, it has surprised a lot of people here in South Korea, too.
Well, thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Lim Yoon-suk speaking to us live from Seoul. Now, North Korea has fired several short-range missiles, marking Pyongyang's latest show of force just days before the inauguration of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Seoul confirmed that the projectiles traveled about 250 kilometers and landed in the East Sea. South Korea's military says it's maintaining full readiness and sharing information on the launches with the U.S. and Japan. It's also enhancing surveillance for potential future launches. Acting President Chae Sang-mok has condemned the missile firings.
이는 명백한 유엔 안보리 결의 위반입니다. 우리 정부는 굳건한 안보 태세와 한미 동맹을 바탕으로 북한의 도발에 더욱 단호히 대응해 나갈 것입니다.
朝鮮はこれまで核・ミサイル能力を強化していく意思を一貫して示してきており、これまでの弾道ミサイル等の度重なる発射も含め、一連の北朝鮮の行動は我が国、地域及び国際社会の平和と安全を脅かすものであります。
The test follows a meeting between South Korea and Japan's foreign ministers that was aimed at strengthening ties ahead of Mr. Trump's return to office. Some analysts suggest that the latest launch may be intended as a message to the incoming U.S. administration. Well, this is Pyongyang's second missile launch of the year. Just last week, it fired what it claimed was a new hypersonic missile system aimed at deterring the country's rivals in the Pacific. In other news, the Philippines says that the movement of a China Coast Guard's so-called monster ship within its territory has been erratic. Well, the large Chinese vessel was spotted about 77 nautical miles off an island of the northwestern Philippine province of Zambales. Well, this has raised concern about its effect on the movement of local fishermen. CNA's Buena Banal with the report.
Alarm over the continued presence of a huge China Coast Guard ship moving closer to Philippine shore. This was raised on Tuesday in a press briefing by officials of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, which is how the country calls its maritime zone in the larger South China Sea. The Philippines called the presence of the so-called monster ship of China as illegal, well within the country's exclusive economic zone as set by international law. Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, J. Tariela, said the ship's movement has been erratic, indicating its presence is not a mere exercise of innocent passage.
The China Coast Guard 5901 was actually termed by maritime security scholars as monster, not because of its capability, but because of its humongous size. It is the only Coast Guard in the world that has an overall length of 165 meters. And it's also only the Coast Guard in the world that has a tonnage of 12,000.
Mr. Tariela said China's deployment could possibly be in response to two laws signed in November that set the Philippines' maritime zones and sea lanes. He added the ship could also intimidate Filipino fishermen as it is operating near a key fishing ground. National Security Council spokesperson and Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya said it is these provocations by China that put pressure on the Southeast Asian country to deepen engagements with like-minded partners.
By their very action of reclamation, militarization, we are now strengthening our alliances with other nations. And when we strengthen alliances with other nations, things like the RAA, that which we never contemplated before, are now becoming reality. And the moment we sign the RAA, they say it's provocative. You know, I hope the PRC understands that this would not have happened if not for them. They were the ones that started all of this.
The Philippines signed a Reciprocal Access Agreement, or RAA, with Japan last year that allows ease of access for more combat training between the two countries. It has committed to more trilateral and quadrilateral engagements with Japan, Australia, and the United States. The Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Roy Vincent Trinidad, also raised concerns over submersible drones the Navy has monitored last year in Philippine waters. The Navy fell short of determining who owned these drones. Forensic examination with the help of military treaty ally United States is ongoing, but results are in for 1 of 5 of these underwater gliders.
These are designed to gather mathematic data, specifically depth, salinity, oxygen level, temperature of the water. This information will have commercial value, it will have academic value, it could also have, with the crisscrossing of information right now, it could also have military purposes or applications.
Philippine officials said the country has demanded from China that its so-called monster ship leave the Philippines' maritime zone. A diplomatic protest has been filed by the Philippines against China over what officials called China's latest provocation. Nearly 200 such diplomatic protests have been filed by the Philippines against China since July 2022, when Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took power. Buena Bernal, CNA, Manila.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, the number of corporate bankruptcies in Japan surpassing 10,000 for the first time in 11 years. And later, leading chip makers trimming initially optimistic capital spending plans as demand outside AI struggles to recover. Hello there. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. Well, it is now time for a business update, and Roland Lim is here to tell us a little bit more about Washington expanding their export controls on AI chips. What's that all about?
Yes, it's closing loopholes on access to advanced tech for all but their closest allies. Now, the U.S. Biden administration has expanded its restrictions on the export of artificial intelligence chips and tech, with the aim of limiting China's access to the technology. Washington will cap the number of AI chips that can be exported to most countries, and this includes Singapore, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. But America's closest allies, like Japan and South Korea, will be exempted from the new rules. Shipments to countries such as China and Russia will still be blocked. This new proposal aims to close loopholes of earlier restrictions aimed at Beijing and Moscow. It's also focused at advanced chips that power data centers which train AI models, most of them made by NVIDIA. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said that the proposal is aimed at ensuring the technology stays out of the hands of foreign adversaries while sharing the benefits with partner countries. NVIDIA called the rules sweeping overreach, adding that the technology is already available in gaming hardware. Now, China has also hit back, saying that it'll take measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. The new rules comes just a week before incoming U.S. President Donald Trump takes office, and it's unclear whether he will follow through with the new rules. Now, checking in on shares of AI-related firms here in East Asia as the sweeping new limits of the sale of advanced AI chips sent shares of chip stocks tumbling on Wall Street overnight. Top chip maker Samsung Electronics lower by 0.4% today, and rival SK Hynix though bucking the trend. In Japan, chip maker Tokyo Electron lost 3.7%, while chip testing equipment maker, that's Advantest, was the hardest hit, plunging more than 9% today. And as investors rotate out of tech stocks, shares in East Asian economies diverged. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 returning from a holiday, it dropped by as much as 2.3% earlier before ending the day 1.8% lower. In Seoul, the Kospi is up 0.3%. Investors also awaiting a key rate decision from the Bank of Korea when they meet this Thursday. The BOK is expected to cut its base rate by a quarter point. That's a month earlier than previously expected to help support the struggling South Korean economy. The Taiwan weighted index did end 1.4% in the green. Leading global chip makers, including Intel and Samsung, have cut investment plans by $9.5 billion. Now, this as demand for electric vehicles and smartphones remains sluggish beyond artificial intelligence applications. Now, a Nikkei compilation found that capital spending, or CAPEX, plans for the top 10 semiconductor firms for fiscal 2024 are seeing an aggregate decline of 2% on year to about $120 billion. Initial estimates in May had called for a 6% on-year increase. Intel has cut its investments to $25 billion from the previous figure of more than $30 billion. The chipmaker logged a record quarterly net loss of some $16.6 billion in the July to September period due to growing losses in its chip foundry business. Intel has also fallen behind in AI sales, losing to NVIDIA. A similar predicament for Samsung as SK Hynix outpaces its compatriot in developing high-bandwidth memory for artificial intelligence. Samsung semiconductor-related investments for 2024 saw its first decline in 5 years after it dipped 1% to about $35 billion. On the contrary, however, companies that focus on AI were investing more aggressively. This as analysts estimates that growth in the global semiconductor market could be heavily skewed towards the technology. Top chip foundry TSMC estimated its 2024 capital spending is at more than $30 billion. The firm holds a near monopoly on production of AI graphics processing units for NVIDIA, while SK Hynix plans to invest more than $70 billion through to 2028 in areas such as memory chips for AI. New bank loans in China grew for the month of December on the back of an improvement in its economic momentum, and that's thanks to government stimulus measures. Now, Chinese banks extended 990 billion renminbi, or $135 billion new loans last month. Now, that's a 70% rise over November, beating a Reuters poll of $109 billion. Now, for the full 12 months, though, new loans extended by banks did post its first decline since 2011. According to official data, banks offered some 18.09 trillion renminbi in 2024. That's equivalent to about $2.47 trillion, in line with a Bloomberg survey. Now, it highlights the reluctance of many businesses and households to take on more debt. But there have been signs of improvement after policymakers announced a series of fiscal and monetary measures. According to Reuters calculations based on central bank data, household loans climbed some 30% on month to 350 billion yuan in December, while corporate loans, well, that nearly doubled to 490 billion yuan on month. Now, on Tuesday, the PBOC said it'll adjust and improve the force and pace of its policy implementation to bolster the economy. Greater China markets on a rally after the country's securities regulator pledged to stabilize the market after a wobbly start to the year. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index rebounding from a 4-month low, snapping 6-day losing streak. Shanghai had its best single-day gain since November, and second boss, the Shenzhen component, is also up nearly 3.8%. Chip stocks leading the gainers there. Now, adding to the optimism are reports that President-elect Donald Trump's economic team is mulling a gradual approach to ramping up tariffs in order to avoid an inflation spike. The number of corporate bankruptcies in Japan are on the rise. A survey by a credit research company shows they exceeded 10,000 for the first time in 11 years for 2024. Now, that's as businesses faced a worsening labor shortage and higher prices for imported supplies due to the yen's depreciation. The bankruptcies rose more than 15% from the previous year to 10,006 businesses, marking the third consecutive year of increases. Nearly all were small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, SMEs have been hard hit with the end of special tax deferral measures introduced during COVID-19. That caused an additional financial burden, according to Tokyo Shoko Research. Total liabilities of nearly $15 billion, down from 2.4% from 2023. And the yen plunged to its weakest level in 37 years against the dollar in the summer of 2024, driving up import costs for businesses. Now, by industry, business failures increased in 8 out of 10 sectors, surveyed. The services sector topped the list, followed by construction and the transport industries. The number of bankruptcies linked to labor shortages, that jumped some 80%. And that's it for business. Shelley.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, on that note, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, America's TikTok users seek alternatives before a possible shutdown of the app by the U.S. Supreme Court this weekend. Hurricane-force winds approach Los Angeles, threatening to fan the flames of the deadly wildfires. A no-show from South Korea's president at the first hearing of his impeachment trial. Police mulling a second attempt at arresting him, possibly as early as tomorrow morning. The Philippines has accused China of intimidating its fishermen at a disputed South China Sea shoal and normalizing what Manila says is an illegal presence.
Ni hao, hi everybody. So I'm a TikTok refugee. I literally just got this app like an hour ago.
America's TikTok users are flocking to Chinese social media app Xiaohongshu on fears of a looming ban in the US. The app has jumped to the #1 spot in Apple's US App Store. Right, let's stay with that story and take a closer look at this app. Well, Xiaohongshu, literally translated, it means little red book, and it's a cross between Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. And it's about 300 million monthly active users. Well, that's way below TikTok's 1 billion, 170 million of them in the US. Xiaohongshu calls itself a lifestyle platform and has become one of China's most popular apps since it was launched in 2013. Now, most of its content is in Chinese, but that doesn't seem to be stopping curious Americans. Posts about so-called TikTok refugees switching to Xiaohongshu have popped up all over social media.
I just downloaded RedNote, and I don't know how it works necessarily, but there's a post that says, "Chinese people, how do you feel about Americans coming to this app?" And the top comment I saw from a Chinese user was, "In the club, we all fam."
A U.S. Supreme Court is set to decide whether TikTok will stay in the U.S. or be banned by Sunday. Well, that's a deadline for the app's Chinese owners, ByteDance, to sell its U.S. assets. TikTok went to court last week to challenge this and said that shutting it down would suppress the free speech of millions of U.S. users. President-elect Donald Trump has also asked the court to hold off on enforcing the law until he takes office. And for more, we are joined now by our correspondent, Deborah Wong from Guangzhou. So, Deborah, before we get into it, tell us exactly what Xiaohongshu is and just how popular it is in China.
So Xiaohongshu is a Chinese social media platform where you can look at video reels, photos, tutorials on anything and everything. We're talking about travel tips and also recommendations about food places. You know, it's so popular that it's even reshaped the way young people travel in China. So there used to be a massive number of tour groups going around outside from China, you know, but now since the pandemic restrictions are over, a lot of young Chinese travelers are turning to Xiaohongshu to follow travel tips. And we're looking at that popularity play out, you know, in places, quiet neighborhoods in Hong Kong, like in Kennedy Town. You see a lot of Xiaohongshu followers going there to take photos. You're also seeing tourists from Xiaohongshu going to universities in Singapore to take photos as well. And Xiaohongshu also has an e-commerce function that helps a lot of young Chinese businesses find their feet. You know, I've seen aspiring fashion designers as well as craft makers tout their wares on the platform. And because, you know, that concept is pretty similar to Instagram, we're seeing an influx of American users whom they're calling themselves TikTok refugees migrate to that platform looking for an alternative to TikTok. Now, because US has repeatedly accused TikTok of stealing private data, many of those who've migrated to Xiaohongshu say that they value freedom of speech, and they say that they're also not convinced by U.S. government's claims that TikTok poses a national security threat. They've even called on followers to download Xiaohongshu and goes as far as to boycott Meta's social media platforms. Now, we've reached out to Xiaohongshu, but we haven't heard back from them. So far, the app is trending. It's one of the top downloads on Apple Store as well as Google Play Store. Meantime, check out what these TikTok refugees have to say.
I'm a cosplayer. I do lots of arts and crafts stuff. And if anyone would like to help me learn like basic Mandarin, like slang or like social media terms, I would literally be so grateful. I will tutor you in English. Like I will be your English tutor.
My beautiful Chinese brothers and sisters, y'all might think that Americans are hateful because of how our politicians are, but I promise you not all of us are like that.
I have no idea what anyone on this app is saying, but y'all seem pretty chill. So I'm going to go download Duolingo, and I'm going to get back to you on that.
Some pretty hilarious reactions there, Deborah. But in general, I mean, how have the Chinese netizens responded to the, so-called influx of TikTok refugees? I mean, are they for it or against it?
Well, I think they are for it. The Chinese users are welcoming these American users with open arms. Many Chinese people, they talked to Xiaohongshu and Weibo this morning to talk about how they're pleasantly surprised to see English videos appearing on the Chinese app, and because when you open Xiaohongshu, all you see is a wall of Chinese text, Chinese videos, Chinese posts. So it was quite surprising when they opened the app today and then they saw videos in English. And the interactions I say so far have been quite interesting. Now, American users, they're posting videos and comments saying that they're here in peace. They want to be respectful on the platform. They want to find a way to communicate with Chinese users. Chinese users have also started sharing video tutorials on how to navigate Xiaohongshu. And we're also seeing subtitles in both languages appearing on the videos where it was quite rare to see them in the past. And I do find it personally quite heartwarming to see that despite all the headlines about hostility, rivalry between China and the US, people have found a way to connect over social media. Check this out.
Hi, TikTok refugee. First of all, I want to say welcome to Xiaohongshu, welcome to Redbook. When I opened this app the morning, I was completely shocked. I have to say you choose the right place. Redbook community is a really friendly with high quality users. If you can speak Mandarin, I think you're winning at the starting line. Maybe I can teach you some useful expressions, including some hot topic, some hot meme in the Redbook.
So it does look like this trend could continue for a while, given that TikTok's fate still hangs in the balance. TikTok has so far come up today to debunk news that it was selling its US operations to Elon Musk. This whole statement came out after Bloomberg reported this morning that Chinese officials were considering that option ahead of the possible ban. TikTok has come out to call it pure fiction. Back to you.
Well, thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Deborah Wong speaking to us from Guangzhou. Now, in other news, firefighters in Los Angeles are bracing for strong winds that could lead to explosive fire growth across LA County. Well, gusts of up to 120 kilometers per hour are set to hit within hours, fueling two wildfires that have killed at least 24 people and burned an area the size of Washington, D.C. The firefighters are on standby over the threat of additional blazes, most likely to emerge in the area between Ventura Valley and San Diego.
As this wind event that we just heard about continues, we urge the public to stay diligent, to stay ready, as the danger has absolutely not passed. Please adhere to any evacuation warning and orders immediately, and prioritize your safety.
LA authorities are also warning they could cut power supply to help prevent more wildfires and protect communities. Residents have been told to prepare for outages that could possibly last more than 48 hours. Meanwhile, embattled LA Mayor Karen Bass has issued an executive order to speed up rebuilding efforts, and that includes expediting permits for houses to be reconstructed and providing 1,400 units to house those who have lost their homes. Well, the final round of truce talks on Gaza set to take place in Doha today. Mediators Qatar, Egypt, and the United States gave Israel and Hamas a final draft agreement yesterday amid reports of a breakthrough in discussions. Well, the trio have intensified efforts in recent months to end the conflict. Reports say Qatar has put renewed pressure on Hamas to accept the new deal, while Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has been pressing the Israelis to do the same. President-elect Trump has been insisting on a hostage deal to be completed before he takes office in less than a week. Now, according to an Israeli media report, the proposed ceasefire would be divided into 3 stages. In the first stage, 33 hostages would be set free, and these include children, women, including female soldiers. Israel would release 50 Palestinian prisoners, 30 of them serving life sentences, in exchange for each Israeli female soldier held captive by Hamas. Israel would also withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor, a narrow band of land between Gaza and Egypt, at the end of the first phase of the deal. Now, the second stage, to begin on the 16th day of the agreement, would require further negotiations, focusing on the release of all civilians and remaining captive soldiers. There would also be an increase in humanitarian aid. And then the third stage will address long-term arrangements, such as establishing an alternative government in Gaza and plans to rehabilitate the enclave. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters that with the progress made, a deal may be reached within days, possibly before President Biden leaves office on Monday. And Sarah Coates tells us more about the post-Gaza war plan and how much optimism there is that a deal can actually be achieved.
Well, there certainly is careful optimism here on the ground in Israel this morning, with a number of signs indicating that a deal could be imminent, including what we did hear from the incoming US President Donald Trump. Speaking out to American media, he said that, "I understand there's been a handshake and they're getting it done maybe by the end of the week." Now, late last night, Israeli officials also instructed a number of hospitals here in Israel to actually prepare to receive hostages. So this would certainly point that a deal could be imminent. It would be 33 people in the first humanitarian stage. This would be women, the elderly, children and the injured. It's after that, during the next stage, that there would be discussions on releasing more captives. Now, while there is a lot of optimism here on the ground in Israel, there's also some pushback, and this is namely from the far right wing, including the finance minister Bezalel Smotrich and also the national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. They're calling this a potential deal a catastrophe, and they're once again threatening to break away from the coalition, to collapse the government if Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, does enter into this deal. But in saying that, he does have a safety net. That is once again from the opposition leader Yair Lapid. He's offering this safety net to Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that if these two decide to collapse the government, he will step in and save it. Now, with regards to this post-war plan that we are expecting to hear from the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken a little later today, it is largely based on the leadership of a number of regional partners, backed up by a revitalized or reformed Palestinian Authority. But we do understand, according to a number of sources in Washington, that there is some pushback within the State Department and also at the White House, with some people there believing that potentially him revealing this post-war plan at the time when he's doing it may actually jeopardize a deal before it gets over the line.
Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, saved by the election. A report from the U.S. Department of Justice says Donald Trump would have been convicted of illegally trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election if he had not been re-elected last year. A U.S. Department of Justice report released to Congress has found that President-elect Donald Trump would have been convicted of illegally trying to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election if not for his recent re-election victory in 2024. Well, the findings concluded that Mr. Trump had engaged in unprecedented criminal effort to hold on to power. The president-elect has described Mr. Smith as deranged, claiming that the findings are fake. The report was unveiled after a U.S. federal judge appointed by Mr. Trump ruled that it can be released. It comes, though, in the wake of his electoral success, which resulted in criminal trials against him being quashed. Benji Haya has more.
This became a familiar sight in 2024. Donald Trump facing dozens of charges in multiple indictments, all of which he denies. He didn't win in the courtroom, but at the ballot box, and it's that's consigned his outstanding trials to the ash heap of history.
He could direct the Justice Department to drop the federal cases. He could potentially try to pardon himself. That hasn't been challenged yet in court. We don't know whether the president is allowed to pardon himself, but the pardon power is pretty broad, so I could imagine the Supreme Court saying he can. That would get rid of the prosecutions altogether.
Those remaining criminal investigations are, in practice, already dropped, though Pamela Bondi, Florida's former Attorney General and Donald Trump's pick to lead his Department of Justice, will be able to formally shut them down. His trial over the alleged hoarding of classified documents was dismissed by a Trump-appointed judge in Florida last summer. His election interference case in the state of Georgia, which landed Mr. Trump with this infamous mugshot, was delayed indefinitely after the judge there, Fani Willis, was disqualified due to a romantic relationship with one of the lead prosecutors. And then there's this.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
Donald Trump's refusal to concede the outcome of the 2020 vote culminated in an attempted insurrection. A mob launched a deadly riot on January 6, 2021, storming the heart of American democracy in a bid to overturn his election loss. But the case, based in Washington, won't see trial. A sitting president cannot face charges, and a Supreme Court ruling grants him retrospective presidential immunity for official acts carried out while in office. The president-elect will take his oath for the second time at noon on January 20th, standing on the very same spot his supporters used as the staging post for their assault on Congress just 4 years ago. Prosecutors charged more than 1,500 people with crimes stemming from the January 6th attack. Nearly 1,000 defendants have pleaded guilty. Yet, as president, Donald Trump, who refers to the prisoners as, quote, hostages, could make good on his oft-repeated pledge to let them go free.
We will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
6 weeks of unconstitutional trials.
After that, his FBI director nominee, Kash Patel, may start pursuing those the president-elect brands the enemies within. In other words, his political adversaries who'd tried to hold him to account or lock him up. Donald Trump has repeatedly vowed to use the Justice Department to go after his opponents in a second term, and Patel's echoed those calls for retribution. Few could have ever imagined a decade ago that this man would win an election, lose another, get impeached twice and criminally convicted, and still come out the other side triumphant, leaving him to reshape the rule of law to his whim. Benji Haya, CNA, Washington.
Donald Trump will take the oath of office for his second term in the White House on Monday. CNA will be bringing you the ceremony live alongside analysis from correspondents and experts. So do join us on the 21st of January, midnight, Singapore, Hong Kong time. A massive underground facility in southern China is getting ready to hunt down cosmic particles thought to have existed since the Big Bang almost 14 billion years ago. Well, it's believed that understanding them will help unlock the mysteries of the universe. Trouble is, these particles are so elusive, they might as well be ghosts.
Called neutrinos, they're baffling because while they're incredibly abundant, they're so tiny that they're unnoticeable and hardly ever react with anything. In fact, these ghost particles are subatomic and far too small to study with lab tools like microscopes.
So neutrino is one of the fundamental particles that consist of our matter world. And because it's barely interacted with other matters, so up to now it's the least understood particle in our world. That's why we need to study it.
Since neutrinos are key to understanding how the universe evolved and expanded billions of years ago, 3 cutting-edge detectors are being built in the US, Japan, and China to trap them for study. The heavy price tag for this one in Guangdong province stands at $300 million and took over 9 years to build. It's buried 700 meters underground on purpose, far away from any cosmic rays or radiation that can hinder neutrinos' detection. When it's fully operational later this year, it'll have capabilities including ranking these invisible particles from lightest to heaviest. While the technicalities may best be left to the physics experts, it's good to know the data here will be cross-checked by American and Japanese scientists whose own detectors won't be ready for the next few years, which means China likely gets a head start in the region.
So we try to measure neutrino mass differences by using this detector to know that which neutrino is heavier, which one is lighter. That's the neutrino mass hierarchy. Of course, we also hope that during the lifetime of this experiment, we can see a supernova explosion nearby. And we can see many of neutrinos coming from there, and we can have a much better understanding of neutrino properties and also the supernova explosion mechanism.
And to match the cutting-edge technology at play here, the 3 new neutrinos detectors have suitably cool names. China calls theirs Juno, Japan's is named Hyper K, and the Americans have settled on Dune.
Well, it's just 15 days to Chinese New Year, also known as the Lunar New Year. And the world's largest annual migration of humans is in full swing. Millions of Chinese are rushing to return to their hometowns by planes, trains, and automobiles. Many are hoping to reunite with their families by the 29th of January. That's the first day of the Year of the Snake. 9 billion passenger trips are expected to be made during the 40-day travel surge. About 80% of these, or 7.2 billion journeys, are road trips. And more than 500 million trips will be made on China's extensive railway links. Well, that's an average of 12.7 million trips daily, up 5.5% from last year. Plane rides also hitting a record high at 90 million trips. Authorities in the Japanese city of Kyoto are moving to implement a major hike in hotel taxes to bring down tourist numbers in order to appease disgruntled locals. Well, a recent survey shows that Kyoto residents are unhappy about traffic congestion and misbehavior. Well, taxes are expected to double to 1,000 yen, or more than $6 per person per night, for rooms priced between $127 to $317. For top-tier accommodation, visitors will see their tax spike tenfold to more than $60 per person. The new levies will take effect next year, subject to approval from the city assembly. Authorities say the tax hike aims to achieve sustainable tourism. Residents have complained of bad behavior from tourists, like harassing geisha for photos. Tensions are highest in Geisha district of Gion, where authorities last year banned visitors from entering certain alleys. Now, major cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Fukuoka are already seeing hotel taxes go up to a few hundred yen per night. Foreign tourist numbers in Japan are expected to hit a record of more than 35 million last year, fueled by the country's weak currency. And that's all we've got for you in East Asia tonight. Don't forget, headlines anytime at cna.asia, and you can always find us on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for your company this evening.